conference. Good morning. I welcome you to the first panel in this conference, and I'm sure there will be many exciting exchanges during these 2 days. I am Priscilla Mifsud Parker. I'm senior partner at Ketkuti Kauke Advocates. As a firm, we have been working with many companies over the past months in order to get their ICOs and exchanges set up and launched. I'm fascinated by the variety and diversity of models and ideas that we come across on a daily basis. This innovation, however, cannot come at the cost of reputation and lack of consumer protection. In fact, with Malta becoming the blockchain island, everyone is talking about regulation, about how the ecosystem created will be able to keep up with all the technological advances, the regulator's role, and so on. The objective of this panel today is that of giving an update on where we stand with this process of regulation and to give an insight of what is to come. I'm very happy to introduce you to our panel today. We have a mix of regulators and industry players, and I'll start off immediately with Joe. So Joe, with Malta having the first mover advantage, it also has had a tough job in order to come up with a new body of rules and regulations. With Malta venturing into the crypto asset space, what would you say are the main opportunities and challenges?
Okay, when you are a first mover, especially in an area where you don't have like historical lessons or there isn't a historical perspective, obviously it's an opportunity because a first mover advantage always gives you an edge over other jurisdictions, but at the same time it has some pitfalls. But I believe that these pitfalls were addressed because I believe that in formulating the regulatory framework, both for blockchain and virtual financial assets, we have assembled a great team of experts, and I think we have put together a strong body of legislation. And I believe that this is the start of a journey. I'm sure that as we go along and that as we start experiencing the regulation of virtual financial assets in particular, I think there will be some changes there and some iterations, I'm sure. I think the challenge now that we face is this, that we are venturing in an area that with crypto assets, which is also a completely new experience. So as much as it is a challenge for the industry, it's also a challenge for us as regulators, the type of skills that we need, our regulatory approach compared to the traditional financial services. We're addressing that, we are building the resources and we're building the capability. But as much as it is an exciting opportunity, we need to be careful also about Malta's reputation. Because when you are starting this journey, the last thing you need is some sort of scandal or some big scam, which will be attributed to the jurisdiction. So we are making sure that our onboarding process is very robust. We're going to make sure that only quality operators, service providers will qualify for a license with the MGA. We're going to make sure with the MFSA, we're going to make sure that we're going to have the proper fit and proper checks for all applicants in order to make sure that we safeguard the integrity of the financial system. But at the same time, it's an exciting journey for us. We are looking forward to it. We are engaging a lot with the industry. We engage a lot. And I believe that we are on the right track. But we have to be careful and we have to listen. We have to engage. And apart from that, also, we are engaging also with our counterparts to make sure that we understand and learn from lessons from other jurisdictions. And I was very happy to hear the DG Connect, Roberto Viola, for example, expressing his impression that Malta has done a great job in the legislation. So we're all very excited and looking forward.
Very good. Well, in my view, fintech is definitely going to be the main change agent going forward, especially for the traditional financial services business model. What would you say are the main challenges going forward for the regulator now in order to bring these two worlds together?
When we talk about fintech, we are talking about a wider perspective. Crypto assets is just one facet of it, just one part. Because fintech, in the next 5 to 10 years, but let's take a five-year vision. fintech is going to transform the way financial services and financial products are going to be delivered to consumers. And with the fast-paced digitization that is taking place, that will bring with it certain challenges also for us from an organizational perspective, because we are by design as an organization, have been doing it for the last 25 years, regulating financial services in their traditional sense. You know, the insurance products, the banking, securities, fund management, wealth management. And we've been doing it that way successfully for a number of years. But now, with technology infiltrating the traditional financial services, but also with crypto assets, the skills and the systems that you need would need to be changed and would need to develop. And on the technological front, as an organization, we really have to play catch up, because there wasn't enough investment in the past. So I have already kickstarted the process to really make major investments in technology, regulatory technology, business analytics, business intelligence. This is all technology that we need, and information systems that we need. So now we're looking at the organization from a different perspective. What type of skills do we need? Do we need more graduates who are qualified in information technology? So if you need people to supervise the banking sector, are we going to look at degrees in the banking industry, or we might need to have a mix of people who are qualified in banking but also in technology? So this is kind of the challenges that it brings, because technology obviously is exciting but also brings a number of challenges. We are looking at these obviously, and we are gearing up so that in the coming years we'll be geared up to face these challenges.
Very good. So this is going to ultimately affect the educational experience and also what we will need in terms of resources in the future.
Exactly.
I turn now to Patrick. I believe we all agree that one of the most discussed topics in Malta right now by startup operators and existing market participants is the level of regulation that the MFSA has adopted. Patrick, I have read with interest some of your speeches, and I particularly like your outlook on the challenge of regulatory tipping points. What is ESMA's approach to regulation?
Okay, as far as financial innovation is concerned, we have in place a framework that allows us to measure, monitor innovative products and processes that may or may not pose threats to our objectives of investor protection, financial stability, and market integrity. Well, what is the point that ESMA may want to act? Well, they may want to act when a certain product or process has reached what I consider to be a tipping point, i.e. that point between too small to care and too large to ignore. If a tipping point is reached, what do? Well, we have three courses of action that we could take. First, we could ban or warn the market participants, investors, that a certain product may be harmful to them. Banning is powers that we have in place today. We've done that across the European Union, in which we've outlawed the distribution of binary options to retail investors and put curbs on the amount of leverage that CFDs may use. Secondly, we could do nothing. That's effectively what we've done, take a wait-and-see approach, and that's what we've done with the DLT. We were going to let the DLT develop. We don't want to take the hand of God and interfere with its development, but let market participants address certain concerns around interoperability, develop governance, develop semantics, and we'll then see later on if there's some type of regulatory support that's needed. Thirdly and finally, we could take a facilitative approach, which is what we've done with crowdfunding, in which we recognized that there were certain threats to investor protection if crowdfunding wasn't regulated, but at the same time we saw that there were regulatory obstacles both at the EU level and national level that needed to be addressed or reconsidered if crowdfunding was to flourish. There, another tipping point, if you will, had been reached.
In November 2017, ESMA issued two statements as a reaction to the rapid growth of ICOs to raise money to fund projects. One mainly alerting investors to the risks of ICOs, and the other one reminding firms of their obligations when actually dealing with ICOs.
Right.
What is ESMA's current position and work on this?
Okay, so ESMA has been charged by the European Commission to determine what the legal status of crypto assets are relative to European law. So we are in the midst of that analysis as we speak. We've been working with the member states to understand the way in which they have transposed MiFID into their national law and to determine whether they would consider certain tokens, if you will, to be financial instruments. And again, we're in the midst of analyzing that work as we speak, and I can see 4 courses of action that may develop as a result of this work, similar to what I said about the 3 courses of action that a regulator can take. 1, we may take the approach that certain fellow regulators in Asia have taken and ban them. 2, we could do nothing because we don't see that the so-called tipping point, if you will, has been reached, that regulatory support is needed. 3rd, we could put ICO's tokens into the existing financial instrument regulation without making any changes. And 4th, and this could be a complementary action, we could adjust the legislation to account for the unique characteristics of crypto assets and proportionality that is needed from a regulatory standpoint.
I agree with you that adaptation is one of the challenges which we're facing right now. So, I now turn to Andrew. Andrew, in your role as lawyer, do you think the VFA Act and the rules provide an effective and attractive regulatory framework for international ICOs?
Yeah, definitely. The fact that Malta has taken the initiative to introduce a framework to regulate ICOs and added certainty, and I think here the key word is certainty, it's giving us a base on which, and we are experiencing this, I mean, even with the turnout you have today, with the interest and even the questions that people are asking, there's genuine interest for projects which are very creative and innovative to want to find a base which is going to be solid for them to build their business, their concept, their idea on. That's not to say that every idea is going to be one that will work, that every idea is one that we should take up enthusiastically without looking into the risks. There's obviously an element of risk that has to be discerned by the professionals that are supporting the MFSA on going through these models. But definitely, the innovation has been welcomed by ICO issuers or prospective ICO issuers, and the fact that the certainty has been added is definitely something that business looks for. Business always looks for certainty. It's very pragmatic in that way. So we are definitely seeing the wave of that hit us, and we are only at the beginning of this. So what will come a year from now is to be seen. But I look towards it with optimism, but based on best practice, and I think the industry has to be very, very careful. When I say the industry, it's ICO issuers, it is VFA agents that are supporting ICOs through the process, and even the authority working through with these components to make sure that we are learning from industry where the industry is going and how to keep adjusting those rules to give more certainty to the framework.
Talking in terms of adjustment, John, we discussed yesterday as well the distinction and the variety of business models which we have, and the importance of actually dealing with ICOs very differently than we would deal with STOs. What are your views there?
Yes, first of all, I think that, as Andrew mentioned earlier, the fact that the regulatory framework, and particularly the VFA Act, provides this legal certainty around the subject, particularly in regulating ICOs and distinguishing ICOs from traditional fundraising activities, provides an incentive for those issuers who are looking at a stable jurisdiction where to launch their ICOs, in that for them and for their investors, there's legal certainty in this respect. And therefore, we've seen a lot of interest coming our way from various industries and various promoters of businesses who are actually looking at fundraising and doing this in an innovative way, not in the traditional way of going to the capital markets for various reasons. But at the same time, it is also putting Malta on the map, I would say, for the capital markets sector in general. In fact, what we're seeing at the moment is a movement towards or a conversion from the ICO model to the STO model. The security token model. And this was following the collapse of certain coins and the realization of issuers and investors that the investors should be provided with clarity and certainty and participation in the performance of the issuer. Of course, this movement, and there are a number of promoters who are presently looking at Malta in launching such STOs, is such that we are now also assisting a number of clients in looking at potentially using traditional securities laws to launch these STOs via Malta. This brings us back to the Investment Services RAN, brings us back to the Prospectus Directive and Prospectus Regulation RAN, and therefore now we're seeing this interplay between the VFA, which is innovative and catering for ICOs as such, and also as the hybrid model, which is the STO model, which is closer to a traditional securities issue. I believe that there's also now a keen interest on those number of exchanges, VFA exchanges, which were looking at setting up shop in Malta, in also attracting this kind of business and moving on to set up either a regulated market or an MTF. Now, this is an interesting development. We've seen already MSC announcing a joint venture in this respect with Binance, and we know of others who are interested in following suit. So this is an interesting development, which I believe will put Malta not just on the blockchain and cryptocurrency map, but also on the global capital markets map of becoming an important player in this space.
And that, I guess, also highlights how important our role as advisors, lawyers, accountants is as well in acting as VFA agents. In fact, I wanted Leonard to expand on this point in terms of the VFA agent also acting as a gatekeeper to the players and of also doing the first level of filtering in between the different types of business models and players.
I think our role as VFA agents, first of all, is to a degree that of educators, in the sense that this industry predominantly is made up of technologists. And technologists tend to see worlds without borders. So for them, if technology allows it, why can't you do it? But as lawyers and as regulators, we see the world in a much more segmented manner. And we think in terms of licenses, in terms of what does this license allow me to do, and making sure that you are carrying out the right activity with the right authorization. So being able to bridge that technological knowledge and platform and converging with the right forms of licenses, the right classifications of the activities, of the tokens you're issuing, of the tokens you may be intermediating, is probably the first crucial role which the VFA agent needs to carry out. And I think it's also the beauty of this industry in the sense, probably traditionally we were used to clients who know what they want, know exactly the industry, and come and tell you, I want a category A license. Here, as advisors, we're much more involved in the molding of the project. We're actually not just carrying out the application process, but also assisting clients in building the business model. So I find this to be much more exciting because you get your hands deeper into the client's activities and you can assist in the process rather than just simply at the tail end of it. So as VFA agents, I think we have this education role, we have this assistance in also building the business model, and finally we then have a role towards the country, I would say, to ensure that we maintain the stability and the reputation of the country. And I think those would be the three main pillars which as VFA agents we need to concentrate on. Very importantly is the reputation and stability of the country, because as Joe rightly mentioned, this industry is in its infancy, it's growing at a very fast pace, But the last thing we need right now is a major scandal or a major news item which can tarnish in any way Malta's name.
Very good. Talking about the very fast pace, how is the MFSA going to keep up with this?
Biggest challenge. That's our biggest challenge. Because I was saying the way we have been supervising financial services was based on the traditional model. So now we are venturing into an area, so we really need to scale up, invest in the right skills, invest in technology, and also re-engineer the way we oversee a financial services sector, both in the traditional sense, but also now in the way it's going to develop with fintech. So that's our biggest challenge, definitely. But I also wanted to add, if I may, a comment on VFA agents, because the concept of a VFA agent is, I would say, an extension of what is happening today. I believe that the industry has a major role to play in keeping the industry clean. As much as the MFSA is responsible, okay, to ensure that our licensing process has the necessary integrity and keeps away business which we shouldn't get in Malta, the same way, I believe that the industry have a role to play. In this particular case, when it comes to cryptos, we went a step further. We said, listen, first you need to become a VFA agent. And you cannot become a VFA agent if you don't have the resources internally to do a due diligence checks, to check who your client is. So those VFA agents who are going to come to us, a one-man show who doesn't have the necessary resources, they're going to fail. That is very clear. But apart from that, we are putting the VFA agents as our first line of defense. It doesn't mean that whatever business the VFA agent brings, we're going to accept it, because then we have to carry out our own checks and due diligence. But I believe that given that the risks, because it's an opportunity, but also a risk, we felt that having these two lines of defense, I believe that it will help the jurisdiction.
Very good. Patrick, talking of regulation and technology, we talk of regulation being technologically neutral. How is it going to keep up with all the advances that we're seeing today?
It's a very good question. And it's almost a religious discussion in terms of whether or not the regulation is technologically neutral or not. If it is technologically neutral, then we need do little. We can go home now. But if it isn't, then you need to ask yourself the question, does the regulation need to adjust for the technology, or does the technology need to adjust for the regulation? And I've seen instances of innovations that fit easily within existing regulation. Take automated advice or robo-advice. That fits easily within MiFID II, in my estimation. But there are others, crowdfunding, the DLT, ICOs, for which the existing regulation did not necessarily anticipate these developments, and some of the regulation may need to be reconsidered if we want to support some of these other innovations.
Very good. Talking of ICOs, Andrew, what are the general warnings which anyone should be considering in terms of the launch of an ICO?
Okay, so in terms of concerns, high-level warnings, I suppose the first thing they should be looking at is making sure they have secure banking relationships, because banks are still coming around to understanding, well, like a lot of us are still getting used to the industry, the way it works. So banking relationships are definitely one thing they should work on before they launch the ICO, make sure they have all the ducks in a row, as it were, before they start the offering. Understanding the compliance culture that comes along with this. I mean, do we have to, as VFA agents, even pegging on to what Joe and Leonard are saying, the responsibilities are there. So equally, the VFA agent has to comply and make sure there's going to be a lot of compliance standards set in place. So best practice is going to be developed by the industry, and an issuer of an ICO should be aware that this is going to be a change in culture. I compare it a little bit to a private company being taken for a listing, where there's going to be a lot more scrutiny in the way that the company is run. So there is going to be maybe not identical, but very similar elements in play that this company has to start having a compliance culture which runs deep through the organization. So that is another warning I would give ICOs before they start. And obviously making sure that the partners that they work with are going to be people who are aligned with the objectives that they would like to roll out. They are transparent to make sure there's a good relationship between them of communication, because that's going to be critical throughout the whole, not only the issuance, but the ongoing compliance process.
Very good. Leonard, what, in very short terms, what are the regulatory advancements that you would like to see implemented going forward?
I think rather than specific advancements, it's more a question of a culture in the sense that we are pioneers in this industry, and I'm sure we didn't manage to get it 100% correct. So there needs to be a culture where the law is not static for 5 years, and then we only change it within 5 years' time. We have some examples in our legislation, like the Financial Institutions Act, which is a remnant of the 90s, which in my opinion should have long been abolished, but which keeps on hanging there. We now need to shift to a culture that, although it's impossible to keep up with the pace, but we should considerably shorten the lag time between the time that innovation takes place and the point in time where regulation is enacted. Apart from that, the culture should also possibly start moving back, and this crypto legislation is a very good exercise in that, moving towards more principle-based regulation rather than prescriptive regulation, because prescriptive regulation tends to be a straight jacket, whereas a principle-based form of regulation will allow the kind of regulatory flexibility which is needed for this industry to flourish.
Very good. Jean, Leonard just referred to time periods. Usually we would be discussing what are the trends that we will be seeing in a year's, 2 years' time. Seeing that in this industry the time periods are very, very short, what trends will we be discussing in a month's time, I would say?
Well, I suppose, as Leonard just mentioned, we'll see a continuous evolution of the regulatory framework to adapt itself to the new technology and to the needs of the industry. I think the law is already flexible enough in this respect, and I think we need to thank also all those who were involved in coming up with the regulatory framework, including the regulators themselves. So I believe that we will see this evolution, which is unprecedented, I believe, particularly when compared to the traditional financial services world. I would like also to see the Malta model being adopted at European level. I always say that Malta is creating a blueprint which ESMA and the other European authorities should pick on and perhaps improve, but hopefully make it European-wide to make sure that Europe is benefiting from what Malta did, and Europe would become a precursor and the pioneer compared to other continents when it comes to the regulation and harmonization of regulation in this space.
Very good. I thank you all for a very interesting discussion. I think you all agree with me that this was very informative. I wish you all a successful conference and a pleasant stay in Malta. Thank you.